Our lesson this week is to learn about a concept called factorials. A factorial is the product of whole numbers from 1 to a given number. So if I say 10 factorial, that means 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 all the way to 10. The notation we use is an exclamation point. So the way you would write 10 factorial is 10 and then an exclamation point. So that tells you, if you ever see 10, then an exclamation point, that says 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And we actually, the way we wrote it in the definition, we kind of said from 1 to that number, but usually we actually count down. It's a little bit easier way to deal with it. So for number 1, it says, what is 6 factorial? Well, 6 factorial is just 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. When I'm figuring these out, I like to group numbers together. So for instance, I know that 3 times 2 is 6, and 5 times 4 is 20. So 20 times 6 is 120. So that just leaves me with 6 times 120, and 6 times 120 just equals 720. So 6 factorial is equal to 720. If I want to do 10 factorial, well, that's just equal to 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. The nice thing about factorials is they're very similar to each other. 10 factorial contains 6 factorial. Right? 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And we know this equals to 720. And so now we can go through and just do some multiplication. So for instance, we can say I need 720 times, I know 8 times 7 is 56. So we can come over here and multiply 720 times 56, and we can do the multiplication on our own. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 2 is 2, carry the 1, so 43. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 2 is 0, carry the 1 again. 35 plus 1 is 36. So that's going to give us 40,320. I now need to multiply by the 9. So 40,320 times 9 would be 0, 8, 8, 2, 36, right? I did 18, carry the 1, 27, plus 1's 28, so 8, carry the 2, 0 times 9 is 2, so that's where the 28 came from. And then 4 times 9 is just 36. And then multiplying by the 10 is just adding a 0 on the end. So 10 factorial actually just equals um, the same thing we just got there, but adding a 0 on the end. So 3,628,800. That's what 10 factorial equals. So the next problem is when we can start doing some math with these. So for instance, 10 factorial divided by 4 factorial, which might seem like a pretty big problem to do, but as you start looking at it, if you think about listing it out, eventually we're going to do some of this in our head. Remember when I told you that 4 factorial is inside 10 factorial, so those just go away, right? Because 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 is on bottom and on top, so you can simplify those out. So really the problem is just going through and multiplying 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5. So to do this, I'm going to multiply 6 times 5 is 30, times 7 is 210, and so you got 210, and then 9 times 8 is 72, so times 72, so that's going to give you 0, 2, 4, 0, 7, 14, and so that's going to equal 0, 2, 1, 1, 5, 1, and so 15,120, and then we just have to multiply by 10, which would give you 151,200. So 10 factorial over 4 factorial is 151,200. And again, I'm just using some different ways to multiply these together. A lot of times you'll be able to use a calculator on these, but not always, so you want to be careful with that. Okay, so number 4, we've got 13 factorial. But what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to list it all the way out. I'm going to stop at the 7. Now think about why I would stop at 7. The reason why is on the top, I've got 13 factorial. On the bottom, I've got a 6 factorial. And so if I listed it out, I'd have 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 on bottom and top, so those can cancel out. And so just what I have left on the bottom is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2. And then what I want to do is I want to cancel out things that go together here. And what I usually try to do is find out whole numbers. So for instance, 5 times 2 is 10, so that can cancel out the 10. 4 times 3 is 12, so that cancels out the 12. So this problem is just going to be 13 times 11 times 9 times 8 times 7. If you wanted to on a lot of these, like I said, you're going to be using a calculator. So you do 13 times 11 times 9 times 8 times 7, which gives you 72,072. And so that is 13 factorial divided by 5 factorial divided by 6 factorial. Number 5, 18 factorial over 17 factorial. Well, this one's actually very easy because if you think about it, 18 factorial is the same as 18 times 17 factorial, right? 18 times 17 times 16 times 15, so on down to 1. Well, starting at 17, that's 17 factorial. So it's really the same as 18 times 17 factorial over 17 factorial. So the 17 factorials cancel out. So 18 factorial over 17 factorial is just 18. Very simple in a problems like that. 6 is very similar, except this time you got 25 times 24 times 23 factorial, right? Because 25 factorial is counting down from 25, 23 factorial is counting down from 23. So this time I can cancel out the 23 factorials. So it's just going to be 25 times 24, which when you multiply those together, you get 600. And so it equals 600 when you divide 25 factorial over 23 factorial. And so that's how you deal with factorials. You go through and just count down. There's lots of cancellation that you need to do. Never multiply the entire top out and divide it by the entire bottom. Whenever you're dealing with factorials, there's always lots of canceling that you can do.